Well, hello, and thank you for joining me for another Alex on Tech and Tech Advice Life video interview. I'm joined today by Dan Brown, the Chief Product and Strategy Officer at Certinia, formerly Financial Force, which has just released its Spring 2024 release aimed at boosting services businesses with AI-powered forecasting and productivity enhancements, which we'll shortly learn about. Dan, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Alex. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks for taking the time. Now, Dan, before we go on any further, can you please give us a quick recap on what Certinia does for those who need a refresher?
Sure. So, Certinia is a software as a service company, and we focus on professional services organizations. Those can be end to end organizations where ProServe is their primary business, but it can also be companies where professional services are embedded. And you can think about us as the operating system for those companies. So, we help them manage the demand that is typically coming through their Salesforce CRM. We help them manage the resources to apply to the projects that they win. We help them manage the delivery of those projects, and we help them manage the financial aspects, the economic gains that they get out of those professional services. So we tie those all together. In the upper end of the market, that's our PS Cloud product. In the bottom end of the market, it's our PS Cloud and our ERP Cloud that work together as an end-to-end solution. And recently, we've introduced a customer success product that rounds out that offer. So once your products are live with your projects or your software, you can manage the customer success activities as well, all on the Salesforce platform.
As a bit of a wordsmith myself, I can't help but notice that you have a very famous namesake who excelled at breaking codes and solving riddles, or at least in fictional literary form. So now the world's latest enigma is firmly rooted in reality: how to best take advantage of AI's growing power to deliver tangible benefits to businesses and users. So when did AI first arrive on Certinia's radar, and what did it initially enable you and your customers to do when it was delivered late last year?
Yeah, so there we could break this up into two parts. What I'll call more traditional machine learning, and then we can talk a little bit about Gen AI that has
Sure.
really come on the scene, as you said, last fall. Prior to that, we've been using the Salesforce platform, particularly Einstein Discovery, for the last couple of years to explore really out of the box machine learning models that our customers deploy. A few years ago, we delivered a machine learning feature called Days to Pay. And this was pretty cool because it allowed our customers to predict and better forecast when at an account-based level and on a billing document level when somebody was going to pay. So it was a DSO thing. And what it did was it allowed, first of all, give you predictive, power on those particular accounts and those invoices. But at the same time, it made the forecasting piece much better and much more accurate. Something that historically had been done in aggregate, like using some sort of regression model, or it had been done manually. Now that can actually be done by the machine learning algorithms themselves. Now, more recently with generative AI, which is more applicable to things like content development or even content aggregation and subsequent summarization, where we're seeing that best applied is in things like how do you generate a status report for a project? How do you consume information that is unstructured, sitting in an opportunity? And so there are a couple of places on our portfolio where we've been using both the early version of Salesforce's Einstein GPT, which allows you to bring your own large language model, although it works out of the box with OpenAI, and also on Copilot, which is another Einstein Salesforce deliverable, which is a little bit more general purpose because Copilot really can work with any data that lives on your Salesforce platform, whether it's a native Salesforce app or it's an ISV app like ours. And both of those have been quite fruitful. And I got to tell you, this technology is moving very quickly. When we looked at this last summer for the first time, we were a little, yeah, this is probably not going to be something. Within 6 months, it's been completely turned around. I mean, it is really, really valuable in its current state, and it's getting better faster.
Well, we're now in April 2024, where it is spring in the US and autumn for us here in Australia. So
Yeah.
talking about how quickly AI has been moving, what are the new capabilities, features, and benefits that the spring 2024 release delivers and enables?
Yeah, so we've added a couple of machine learning models to our portfolio, and one of those is about taking a an opportunity that is in your pipeline and looking at how what's the likelihood of it being being won as it moves through the pipeline. Now, this involves a fairly complex set of data, and using that data that sits both in your professional services cloud product from Certinia as well as your Salesforce sales cloud product, we can give you a prediction. And those models, by the way, the model can be deployed as is, it can be augmented, it can be tuned. But one of the really cool things that we've done with this release is we've given you the ability to actually simulate this. Now, this is one of the hard things about machine learning models, particularly those that involve neural networks or deep networks, is how do you understand how they work? How do you what's the transparency? This has always been such a difficult thing, especially for end users. And so what we've done is we've given you an experience when you get the prediction for the opportunity, the services opportunity, to play around with the parameters. So this is seeing the sensitivity to the prediction based on the inputs. So if you have a project that has a profile of a start date, if you start playing around with that start date, you can see just how sensitive the prediction is to the start date. So even if you're using a decision tree or some simple, multivariable regression, or even a deep network, it really doesn't matter. With this sensitivity analysis, you get a better look and feel for how the prediction can change and be improved by changing some of the input parameters. So it's really exciting. It's something that we just shipped in our spring release.
It sounds like it's actually making the forecasting fun. It's like a game.
Totally, it
Yeah.
is like it's interactive, and I think that's one of the really cool things about it. And this is sort of our whole positioning and thought process behind machine learning, whether it's sort of a classic machine learning or Gen AI, is to really make it pragmatic. Now, historically, machine learning has been the tenet of specialists, a data team that sits over and does its work. But we want to inject those machine learning models right in the experience where people go and get their job done. But one of the hurdles is, how do you make that explainable? How do you make it so that people, it's transparent, they understand how it works? And one of the ways that we're doing is with this simulation experience.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things about AI is that people have not wanted it to be a black box. They have wanted it to be explainable and contestable. If you don't agree with something, you can keep playing with it until you both come up with, the AI and yourself comes up with something that you both agree on. And given that this is all cloud software, it updates automatically. There's nothing for the end users to install. I mean, all this AI stuff is really giving us incredible superpowers.
Yeah, it really is. It's remarkable how quickly you can deploy an AI model in an environment. Now we are, I think, quite fortunate in a couple of ways. The first is because we sit on the Salesforce platform, and typically our customers have multiple Salesforce products, we get to access a lot of data. And this is really important in machine learning models because if I'm looking at, say, a project deliverable or a project delivery, the predictions that I might want from that may actually require data that is outside of our system. But likely it's sitting in a Salesforce application or another ISV app. And those are all readily available from the platform, and therefore from the platform machine learning. So you can deploy these machine learning models very, very quickly. And what's more, because of the discovery is gives you such great transparency perspectives, you can look at things like your residuals on your model if you want to play around with them. You can subtract features, you can add features. So to your point, it being a game, it actually makes it fairly easy for a business analyst to work with these models and tune them. And I think this is really important. Most businesses do have differences in what provides predictive power. And this has been one of the challenges, I think, in business software vendors is how do I give you as a customer your model? And with the help of Salesforce and some of their investments, we're able to do that. So the models for each one of our customers can be different. It can be isolated based on their tenanted data, and we think that that's a real game changer.
You can see all the Star Wars stuff that I have behind me as I'm listening to you
Yes,
talking about all of the predictive natures. I'm thinking of Yoda and the Jedi Council and even the Emperor foreseeing
yeah,
things through the Force. And you've got the Salesforce
that's right.
and you were Financial Force.
That's
So,
right.
I mean, again, it's the superpowers that allow us to actually take all this data and use it in ways that just wasn't possible via technology anywhere as easily as before. And it's incredible to see it evolving so quickly.
Yeah.
In your media briefing earlier this month, which I was attending, for me it was 3 a.m, but I wanted to be there. One of your customers in the
I
UK,
appreciate that.
yeah, well, one of your customers in the UK,
Yeah.
I can see why you did it at the time you did because it was 6 p.m. for jellyfish in the UK,
Yes.
and unfortunately,
Yes,
just
Adam. Yeah.
for us in Australia, it was what it was. But that's okay. That's the world we live in. But they were featured as an early adopter of this new version.
That's
So
right.
can you please recap the story of how they've used the new capabilities to their advantage?
Yeah, so they're looking at a couple of capabilities. One I mentioned is that they're going to consume in with the spring release had to do with predictive power on an opportunity, a services opportunity. But they've also looked at margin prediction. They've looked at end date prediction. They looked at a thing called days to staff. So it's a prediction on how quickly you're going to be able to match a resource with a backlog project or a project that is in the pipeline. So they've looked at multiple models, and I think one of the things that's really interesting, we've worked very closely with them, is machine learning, unlike other areas of technology, does require a couple of other things for an organization to be successful. So one of the things is your data, the shape that your data are in, and understanding what data you have access to, and what data is most relevant to your organization's uniqueness. That's one of the things you have to keep in mind. And without good data, you're not going to get good machine learning outcomes. And without understanding what things are important to you as a company, you're not going to get good machine learning models. And I can give you examples of that if you'd like. The other thing that they've understood or come to see is there's a lot of enablement. Human beings, we want to know why. We're always asking questions. The whole notion of machine learning is about prediction, and it should answer a question of why something is going to happen. Like, I want to know why this prediction, and then I want to be able to control. So I want to take that information and use it in some ways. I might want to automate, but if I don't like the prediction, I might want to, change things. Or if I like the prediction, might want to know why that's the case so I can reproduce that. So having the end user understand how the models work, how what their sensitivity to things are, having them at the point of decision. Those are all things that are really front and center for Adam and Jellyfish, and things that they're exploring. So I think they've been really thoughtful and smart about how they've rolled things out, thinking about the data, thinking about the enablement for the people there, and then thinking about how they need to tune their solutions as they develop them over time. So I think it's really been a great partnership with them.
So how often do the new releases arrive? Is it quarterly or biannually or yearly? I mean, I guess I'm asking, when will the next release arrive? And are there any sneak peeks on the capabilities you're working on next?
Yeah. So we actually have different release cadences for different products. Our main release line falls in lockstep with Salesforce's, which is 3 times a year, so once every 4 months. But we also have, particularly in areas where we're moving fast, we have working more closely with early adopters, I should say, because we try to move fast with everything that we do. Those are typically done on a monthly cadence, and then we have some things that are actually deployed on a weekly basis. And of course, we do updates and fixes as need be. But the next major release is coming in this summer, so roughly the August to September timeframe. And what I think the thing that we're most excited about is some of the Gen AI capabilities that Salesforce offers in their platform. And so we expect with this summer release, we're being quite aggressive about it. Some of it depends on what Salesforce allows us to do, to be able to incorporate both Einstein GPT as well as Copilot. Now, Copilot's kind of interesting because Copilot is a standalone conversational tool that has access to all your data on your Salesforce platform. So, your CRM, your services piece, if you're using our tool, your professional services, if you're using our customer success tool, your customer success engagement. So, lots of really good data, and you can ask Copilot various questions. But wiring Copilot up so that it does even more interesting things and facilitates your decisions or facilitates automation, that's what we're really after. And we've been really, really impressed with how Copilot works, the prompt tools that go with it, and so on. So, provided we can package that up and ship it, that's kind of the next step of our AI investment.
And earlier you mentioned that Salesforce was using OpenAI, which of course is ChatGPT. But when you're talking about Copilot, is that Microsoft Copilot, which is also based on ChatGPT but has its variations, or is it a different Copilot?
Yeah, it's Salesforce's Einstein Copilot. So I think the Copilot moniker has been, GitHub had probably was the first, but I think the Einstein Copilot is the Salesforce version that we're using.
Sure.
And it's really targeted at the business user.
Yeah. No, just for clarity for those who may not be familiar with the fact Salesforce has their own Copilot, and yes, it's become a standard term in business because people know what it means. I mean, for years, the manufacturing sector with robots had cobots, which is a robot that works alongside you. So, I mean, you don't hear that as much, but probably going to start hearing it a lot more now that we can have robots powered by generative AI, which we've seen on stage with Jensen Huang, and even from Elon Musk with, I guess he hasn't shown a Grok powered robot yet, but I'm sure he will. But look, I always like to think that customers are your best R&D division, and the fact that you're doing weekly and monthly updates for some of those early adopters goes to show that you work very closely with them. But can you share an idea that a customer wanted to see implemented? I mean, there are probably several, right? But that has now become a standard feature for all your customers, because the customers are the ones experiencing the pain points, and they know that you can help them to solve it.
Yeah. So I'll give you a kind of bigger example, not just a feature. We have, in fact, in 2 weeks at Technology Services World down in Orlando, we'll meet with some of our largest and most strategics. Not all of them are our largest, but a group that really works with us as an organization on strategy, corporate and product. And one of the things that came out of that was, we were thinking, gosh, we need to close the gap between how you manage service opportunities and how you staff projects. If you think about it, that's a little simplified, but you get the idea. And, historically, quotation of services has been a pen and paper, then a spreadsheet exercise. Every week the spreadsheet would come out with all the the costs and so on. And so what we did is we came in with what we call a services CPQ. That's the name of the product. It's a facilitated estimation tool, and it really closes that gap between opportunity and delivery to revenue recognition, and obviously the billing in between. So it's a really critical component. It's really important from a forecasting perspective. So we worked with several very large customers on this. One that I'm happy to mention is Salesforce. They were one of our first customers to adopt that, and we work very closely. For example, when you're quoting something, or a recent feature that we've worked on with a number of customers is how do you want to understand the work that is done as a business investment? So you're not charging for it, but you're doing it as a business investment, either because it's an important opportunity or because you want to correct something and so on. But you want to understand why you're applying those resources to that area of the quote. So that's just one example. But generally speaking, Alex, when we build product, we're always showcasing that early to customers, whether it's through the epics and stories that describe the functionality, or on a regular cadence before it's released. We provide previews that anybody can get access to, kick the tires on, give us feedback, and help us improve the product.
Now, I know that you've got over 100 customers in Australia and over
Yeah.
1,300 globally. And although this interview will
Yeah.
be available globally via YouTube and my site, given that I'm based in
Yeah.
Australia, are there any Australian customer success stories that you'd like to briefly highlight?
Yeah, there are a couple. I think we've been very fortunate to have, a great organization down in Australia. We have a fantastic set of customers down there. Avance is a good example of that. There, a lot of people don't, when they think about professional services organization, they don't think of CROs, clinical research organizations, but Avance is a really good example of that. They're actually a customer end to end, so what they get, the benefit that they get out of the software is connecting up that pipeline, being able to, take those research projects, staff them, understand the profile of the people, then be able to bill, recognize, and then run their entire, GL, APAR all on one platform. So there's no integration. Things work with each other because the objects in the process know about one another. And that's actually very similar to the way Proximity works. They're a consulting firm, and I think one of the great things about focusing on the professional services organization is with all this technology, and it's not just machine learning and Gen AI. Everywhere you look, people have new tools to go help them do their jobs. There are consulting companies that are really helping other enterprise learn what's out there, deploy it in a thoughtful way, get their data in shape, and then be able to go apply things like machine learning. So we're really fortunate because we see this every day. The professional services organization, I think, is becoming more and more important to every company out there. And then, another company, which is also a partner, is Agilix. It's a fairly large professional services organization. They focus on things like, business software like our own. They also focus on things like security, and they sort of emulate, I think, very typically what some of the business drivers that customers get out of using our software. Almost immediately they'll see elimination of revenue leakage because the tight tie between delivery and billing and revenue recognition, they were able to get over 100% ROI very, very quickly on the combination of Salesforce and our software, which is also something we typically see when a company comes in and uses those things both together. So those are three examples of customers that I think are really, are very thought leading, but also have done a great job with their own digital transformation. And we are very fortunate to be a part of that strategy.
Now, before I ask you some closing questions about the future and yourself,
Yeah.
is there anything else that we should know about Certinia and the new Spring 2024 release?
Well, other than it's incredibly awesome, one of the things that I think is the, kind of the pride. It's a core value of ours, customer obsessed. That's what I would love everybody to walk away from listening to this. Innovation is fundamentally predicated on working with customers. It's not as much inspiration as it is perspiration. You obviously have to have ideas, but if you are fortunate enough, like we are, to have great customers that work with us and are willing to take innovation, new things, work with them, give us feedback, be transparent about what works and what doesn't, and help us to iterate. Well, that's the greatest, innovation relationship that you can have. And that's why, we're very, very fortunate as a company, and we just maintain these very, very close customer relationships. And it's one of the reasons why we have a 40 plus net promoter score as a company. So that's, I guess, the one thing I would love everybody to leave with if they left with one thing about Certinia.
Now, given how quickly AI is evolving, GPT-5 will launch later this year. We've
Yep.
seen Meta.ai arrive and Grok 1.5, and everything is going so quickly. So, any more thoughts on how AI will evolve over the next year through to the end of the decade, given, again, how fast it's all evolving?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to see where pre-trained transformers are going. There's a really good article in the Economist recently about what are the limits of GBTs. Have we reached? GBT 5 is supposed to be absolutely stunning. So I think we're all waiting to see what that gets us. I think the interesting thing about GBTs is that they start to get into the knowledge worker area, in particular, creative or content development. The real question to me is what's going to get us to two things. Number one, work creation. Professional services are all about knowledge work, so it is a type of content, but it's a very different type of content than, say, writing a blog or a news story or something, or summarizing something. So I think that's one question that I have. And then I think the second question is, and this actually goes a little bit more back to classical machine learning. When one of the problems in machine learning is the notion of the stable world, which means, classic machine learning works very well when the past and the future look alike. But in professional services worlds and knowledge worker environments, that's not typically true. Projects are very different. There are obviously things you learn as you go from one to the other, but almost always there's some novel, something's novel about it. So I think the real question is, how is machine learning, how is Gen AI going to help with that novelty? Actually, reinforcement learning is a place that does this particularly well. How we apply that to knowledge work, I think, is to be determined. Obviously, we've seen that be very, very powerful in gaming, but gaming is a very restricted environment. So I'm excited about what's coming. I think these are areas that you're going to see a lot of innovation, certainly from Certinia, but I don't know what it's going to look like.
Well, we're all waiting to find out with bated breath and great expectations. So we'll wait to see. Now, from
Yes.
the future to the past, can you please share a memory of your first personal computer?
Oh, wow. First personal computer. Well, I tell you, when I was, I'm not going to tell you how old I am. Well, this is in the distant past. Let's just say that. But when I was in eighth grade, maybe I didn't have, my school had a TRS 80 computer from Radio Shack.
The
If
Trash
you know,
80. The Trash 80.
the Trash 80. Yes, you know it.
Yeah.
And I coded BASIC, and I remember ghost subs and peeks and pokes and crashing that thing a few times because I peeked and poked in the wrong memory location. But that was my first. And then, of course, the color version came out, and that was just a game changer. But that was my first experience with a computer. Thank you for letting me relive that moment because it was pretty fun.
Yeah. My first computer was in 1979. I was 4.5 years old, and my father bought the Exidy Sorcerer, which was a computer from an American company that decided they wanted to go into pinball machines. They got out of the computer business, which was a great shame. But at the time, the Commodore PET was the computer
Oh, yeah.
from Buck Rogers in the 25th century. The Apple I had come out in 77. They had the Apple II. I don't think it was the Apple IIe yet, but yeah, they were the early days of, I mean, Steve Wozniak was still, making them in his, well,
Oh,
he
yeah.
had Apple at the time, but yeah, those were incredible times. And how far we've come since that we're now doing video conferencing and everything else with devices in our pockets and AI, all that science fiction stuff. It's all finally coming true in our lifetimes, which is such a wonderful thing to see.
It's incredible.
Now,
Truly remarkable.
it is. It is. We do live in incredible times, and I hope it keeps going for millennia yet. Now, my second last question is to ask if you could please share some of the best advice that you've received in life to help you get where you are today.
The best advice, I guess it's kind of a combination of two things. The first is learning is sort of the only long-term competitive advantage for a company, and by virtue of that, for professional development. So it's a combination of curiosity and willingness to go read something, listening to something, play around, experiment, and so on. And then I think the other thing that kind of goes with that, especially in novel situations, but not only, but especially in novel situations, is you have to be okay with making mistakes. You have to obviously recognize when you make mistakes, but you can't feel bad about it too long. You got to pick yourself up and just kind of get on with it. And I think this is sort of a growth mindset message. But I think those two things go quite hand in hand, and those are the things that I I've tried to do as much as possible. Can't say I always do them well, but I would say that's the best advice I've ever had.
So, what is your final message to the viewers and the readers?
Well, my final message is first, thanks for checking it out. It's a pleasure to be with you and be invited, Alex. So thank you. And then second, check out Certinia. If you have interest, we've got some great products, and I can tell you we're very customer focused. And if you have any questions, email me at dbrown@certinia.com.
Well, Dan Brown, the Chief Product and Strategy Officer at Certinia, thank you so much for your time. It's been a great pleasure to meet you, and I do hope we can speak again in the future.
Thank you, Alex. I look forward to it.
Thank you. Bye bye.